welcome to episode 6 of the Discussing Film Newscast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michael Slavin. As always, I'm joined by Beatrin Chazard. This week, it's been a few weeks. I apologise, I'm entirely to blame. This is not editing magic by Bean, or is it? Who knows? So this week we have a lot to talk about. We have Snow White news, we have news about Succession, and we have news about Star Wars Vision, the upcoming Star Wars anime. There's a lot to cover, and check us out.
So for our first piece of news today, we have a Discussing Film exclusive alongside Deadline. Nico Parker has been cast as Joel's daughter, Sarah, in HBO's The Last of Us. The Last of Us has actually already begun filming, and Pedro Pascal, Gabriel Luna, and Nico Parker posted a fun little picture of all of them in the car.
It's not fun.
To announce it.
It's not fun. They know what they're doing. It's cruel. Without spoiling, for those who know about The Last of Us, Nico Parker's role as Sarah has a very particular place in the series, and they're kind of hinting at a very pivotal scene, which obviously is clearly going to be translated over from the games to the series, with Pedro Pascal as Joel, Gabriel Luna playing his brother, and then Nico Parker obviously playing his daughter, and them all in a car together. It's, quite a pivotal scene, and I just wanted to know that. I thought that was very cruel of them, but it's very exciting, and it's really good casting. I was really excited for Discussing Film to sort of get the exclusive on this so we initially got an exclusive when I interviewed the director of Chernobyl, who was initially directing the first episode of this and is executive producing, so it feels quite full circle that we now have an exclusive on what will probably be the last major piece of news, especially casting wise, until the show comes out. Nice. So I think that's the last. This may be the last week I'm able to cram The Last of Us news into the show.
The Last of Us. The Last of The Last of Us.
I'm just not going to dignify that with a response. It doesn't deserve one.
The audience is clapping. It's fine.
The audience is not clapping. They are pity clapping at best. So.
Next piece of news.
Next piece of news, which is another news that I imagine that for a little while this is going to be the last time we're going to be talking about this, which feels like the end of an era, because almost every single episode of the newscast so far we've spoken about casting for this film, and that film in question is Knives Out 2, where Madeline Klein and Jessica Henwick were added a couple weeks back to the cast, and then this week it was announced that Ethan Hawke had been seen on set as they'd started filming and has therefore been cast in the film as well, which is really exciting. And I don't know, Ethan Hawke just screams the victim to me. Ethan Hawke screams he's going to be the person who gets killed, he's going to be the mystery. But that's just my opinion. What do you make of these pieces of news?
Well, I just want to harken back to our conversation about who we think was going to be added to the Knives Out 2 cast. And I said there was someone missing, there was an age demographic missing, someone in their early 20s. And then Madeline Klein got cast right after I said that. So I got the demographic right.
You can't just cast a net over a whole 5 to 10 year age range and go, well, actually, I said they were going to be between 25 and 45, so technically.
No. I said we're missing a young person from the cast, and then a young person got cast. So that is what it is. I'm very excited for Jessica Henwick, Jenny Henney. I think she's great, and I think, she's on the precipice of breaking out into bigger roles. So that's exciting for her.
She was really great in Love and Monsters, which I thought was really underrated. It's often just discussed as that Dylan O'Brien movie that got nominated for an Oscar, but Jessica Henwick is really good at it. So it's really exciting after that and Iron Fist and other roles where she's been brilliant. It's really exciting to see her get sort of a breakout casting such as this.
Yes. Also, one last thing, the same article that they found Ethan Hawke in it.
Mm-hmm.
They also said that Jada Pinkett Smith was on set, but it wasn't her. Like, that was Janelle Monáe. They took a picture of Janelle Monáe, and they're like, "Oh, look, it's Jada Pinkett Smith." It was so embarrassing.
That's so bad.
If you heard that she was in that movie, I don't think that's true. I think that was Janelle Monáe. It's hard to tell because she was wearing a hat and she was wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm.
But Janelle Monáe is in the movie, and that looks like Janelle Monáe. It does not look like Jada Pinkett Smith.
I'm just going to move on from that. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But yeah, I think Ethan Hawke's really exciting, and I think that similar to how great the cast was for the first film, I think it's really interesting that we're sort of seeing these like creator-led films where it's like, this is not based on an existing franchise, it's not based on a book, or even The Last of Us, which I love, not based on like a video game or something like that. And it is attracting some of the biggest up-and-coming stars and some incredibly established stars, such as Ethan Hawke. So I'm very excited for Knives Out 2.
Yeah.
Rian Johnson stays winning.
Actually, someone mentioned this on Twitter. I don't remember who, but they said that the first Knives Out movie was kind of, it pretended to be an ensemble movie, but it wasn't really like about an ensemble. It was about like 3 characters.
Yeah,
so,
it's not an ensemble movie as much as it's just the cast is so good that you remember like every moment from the supporting cast far more than you would for a normal movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but with this movie, it needs to be an ensemble. Like, it has to be an ensemble movie. Like, you can't put this talent in and then like waste it. I won't let it happen. Rian Johnson, I'm in your house.
Well, I'm
in your house.
I think the way there was tons of talent in the first movie, but I think the way they've kind of drip fed the casting of this does sort of hint towards there being a more even split of storylines, and it being a more traditional ensemble film, because there was a period where every week there was Knives Out 2 casting, and I don't think they would have made such a defined and clear note of announcing every single one if 1 week of that was not important, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So from one very exciting cast to another, the cast was announced for Elizabeth Banks' Cocaine Bear film, produced by Lord and Miller. This is a film that follows a 175-pound bear that consumes 40 containers of cocaine, and it's going to be starring Alden Ehrenreich, Kerry Russell, Ray Liotta, O'Shea Jackson, and Jesse Tyler Ferguson, which is such a cool cast for such a funny concept. Elizabeth Banks is great. Lord and Miller rarely miss. I'm so excited for this.
I have no opinions about this movie. It's about a bear that ingests a ton of cocaine.
What more do you want?
Yeah, there's nothing to talk about. I'm gonna watch it and I'm gonna like it. That's all I have to say.
Grow up. No opinions on a film called Cocaine Bear. That's mental, and that's such fun cast as well. No, you're weird. No.
For saying I'm gonna like the movie?
Moving on.
Okay.
So, with some of the pieces of news on this show, there are some that I really care about, and there are some that Bean really cares about. This is one that I would say Bean feels deeply about to her very core. So there is going to be a supernatural prequel called The Winchesters. It's in the works at the CW, and the series will focus on Dean and Sam Winchester's parents. Jensen Ackles is set to executive produce, as well as return as Dean Winchester in a narrator role for the series. And on top of that, it led to some some interesting scenes between him and Jared Padalecki on Twitter. So, Bean, what did you make of this news and the subsequent fallout between the boys?
Okay, so backstory on me, I'm not going to try and make this too long, but I watched Supernatural in my teen years. It was a very formative experience for me, and I caught up right before the finale, so I've seen every season of Supernatural, all 15 of them. I'm very well versed in the show, well versed in the lore. It all lives in my head. Trust me when I say that this is not an exciting project for Supernatural fans. Like, it makes complete sense because if you don't know, the premise of the show is that these two brothers, a mother killed their demon. A mother killed their demon. No, a demon killed their mother when they were very young, and they were raised by their father, and they grew up hunting monsters. And then later their father gets in trouble, and then basically from there the show is just about the two of them. So you find out in the show that their mother comes from a hunting family that hunts monsters, and there are a couple of like scenes in the show about the mother and the father when they were young. Like there's a time travel episode, like Dean and Sam meet them, or maybe just someone meets them. This is a while ago when I watched the show. But the lore is there to have a spin-off around Supernatural, and it makes sense that they would choose this story because it would still be like a very familiar story. Like it's characters you're still familiar with, but it would be about hunting, and will also be like kind of retro because it would take place in like the 80s, 90s. No, probably before that, the 70s. That being said, Supernatural has tried many times before to do spin-off TV shows. There was a backdoor pilot that was on Supernatural that I saw once that led nowhere, and also there was talks of
what was the backdoor pilot for?
I forgot the name of the show, but
I'll find out. Give me a minute.
Yeah, and also there was a they were going to make, because the kind of the theme song for Supernatural is "Carry On My Wayward Son." So they were going to have an all-female, younger version of Supernatural using characters from the show called Wayward Sisters, and with already established characters in the show. Like Claire Novak was like a really established character, and she was played by Catherine Newton. But unfortunately now Catherine Newton's getting kind of big. Like she's going to be casting in the MCU. So that's not happening. But Supernatural fans mad about this. Supernatural fans do not want this, mostly because kind of like it takes away the most interesting parts. Like Eric Kripke, who made Supernatural great to begin with, is not going to be involved. Also, people really, really hate Sam and Dean's dad. He was abusive towards them.
That's what I was going to say. My minimal knowledge of Supernatural was that their dad was an awful person, and I felt like it's very difficult for a show like this. They're going to very much like humanize him, surely. So,
yes, I think it's way more obvious in the early seasons of Supernatural just how terrible their father was to them. And basically in a lot of spin-off content, like I think there was like a diary that was canon that it just like really detailed how bad it was and how like emotionally and sometimes physically I think abusive he was, especially to Dean, which makes kind of the fact that Dean's narrating this even worse. But he actually gets a bit of a redemption within the show. Yeah, they bring him back. Who plays his dad? What's the name of the actor? Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I also checked, and the proposed backdoor pilot was called Supernatural Bloodlines. It was the 20th episode of the 9th season, and it was about the clashing hunter and monster cultures in Chicago.
Yeah, that went nowhere. Going back to Jeffrey Dean Morgan, though, for the 300th episode, they have, like, one of those... So, there's obviously the 100th, 200th, 300th episode are major milestones in the show. The 100th episode, we don't have to... Whatever. The 300th episode, they kind of had, like, one of those, like, your greatest wish moments. So, one of the characters wish that their mom had never died or something like that. So you see them as a family. They have like one last family meal while they have this wish, and they kind of like forgive their father for being terribly abusive after their mother died. It's weird. They have like a conversation and stuff like that.
So just in general,
but people don't really...
the idea of his character being, of all the proposed spin-offs you could have done, the however many seasons worth of storylines, the fact that they've chosen a fairly irredeemable character to have this sort of, you'd imagine, quite heroic set of storylines is
it was kind of weird. It's kind of weird, especially since he's not gonna be the villain. He's supposed to be a nice guy.
Yeah, but
especially I think in the end of season 11, in the beginning of season 12, they actually bring their mother back from the dead, and that was a terribly, like, people did not receive that well at all.
Hero to villain.
Like, she was just, like, poorly written, all these things. So, like, looking at how both the father and the mother were written after the original showrunner left the show, Eric Kripke, I don't have a lot of faith that this TV show is gonna like do them justice. Like, it makes sense because people are familiar with the characters, but also the last time we've seen them, they haven't been written very well, and they haven't had very compelling storylines. So, what's the point?
Yeah. And then there was the, as I alluded to earlier, there was the development, which was that this was on Twitter the first that Jared Padalecki had heard about it. Jensen Ackles' supernatural brother, which I found really interesting because, like, a lot of the stuff around the end of the show almost seemed to be that, like, he was being kind of, I understood it as him being, like, clued in more than Jensen Ackles anyway, because they wanted to promote his sort of Texas Walker Ranger show that he was doing with the CW. So what did you make of the boys fighting so publicly?
That does not surprise me at all. Like I said, I've been following this cast for a very long time, and that just seems totally in character for Jared Padalecki. I don't know. I used to really, when I was a dumb teenager, I thought he was a cool guy, but now I'm just like, oh, he's just a guy. But yeah, it was very funny to see them, like, fight, like, just pick up the phone. Like, I think they used to be neighbors because they both used to live in Texas, but then Jensen moved away, so they don't see each other as much anymore, especially after Supernatural stopped filming. So it's, like, no wonder that they're not as close anymore. But still, I don't know why you would, like, publicly say it on Twitter. I mean, I do. He just had a moment where he was all like, I found out about this on Twitter. I guess I'll let everybody know this is how I found out about it on Twitter instead of just picking up the phone.
Yeah, it was,
But it's okay, they kissed and made up.
outside of perspective, I found it very funny.
It was pretty funny. It's just like, I wasn't surprised. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep an eye out for that. I think, yeah, that sounds, do I remember correctly, is it an animated show or is it live action?
I think it's live action.
Oh, interesting. So it'll be hopefully.
I wonder if they'll bring back the original actors that played the young version of...
Maybe.
Yeah.
In the next piece of news, it was announced that Rachel Zegler was going to be playing the upcoming live-action version of Snow White. So this is a trio of casting for her. So she's going to be in the new West Side Story, she's going to be in the upcoming Shazam 2, and now she's in this, and none of those films have even come out, and she's already got these roles just lined up, these huge major roles. So what do you make of the casting and the announcement of the Snow White live-action movie?
Okay, so Snow White was my favorite princess when I was a little kid, so very much enjoy Snow White. Love her. I think Rachel will make great Snow White. She has, like, certainly a voice on her, and I think it's cute. I love Snow White.
And
but
Mark Webb to direct as well.
Mark Webb, questionable, but whatever. Like, I've never seen him do... Has he done anything like this before?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's like this, but, like, 500 Days of Summer, Gifted, you know, he had a hand in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. He has done interesting stuff with well-written female characters before.
Okay.
As well as,
so,
you know, Amazing Spider-Man, but, yeah.
I'm going to trust Mark Webb.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to trust him. Where I have a bit of an issue here, Ben Platt's father is producing, as he has his hands in all of the great musicals, all the great musical movies that are coming out. Ben Platt's father is involved with all of them. Ben Platt's father and Ben Platt are besties with Pasek and Paul, which are songwriters that I'm not huge fans of. They did Dear Evan Hansen, and they did The Greatest Showman, and they did Dogfight, which is a musical. It's a musical, so people really haven't heard of it. But all of their music
Are you going to say
sounds...
La La Land?
Okay, here's the thing. They worked on La La Land, and they also worked on the new song for Aladdin, the live-action Aladdin movie. But the thing is, they didn't do any of the songwriting. They just did the lyrics. And from what I understand with La La Land, they didn't even like write the lyrics from scratch. Like they were already underway, and they just kind of like refined it and like added some more.
I knew asking you that would set you down there.
Oh no. But yeah, so when they write original music, it's very contemporary sounding. Like I haven't really heard anything from them that was classic. I think they did the Christmas Story, but Christmas music's kind of like very, what's the word? It's very stylistic. Like there's a very defined style. So as for like emulating the style of a classic Disney movie, because they're obviously going to cut some songs, I don't know if Pasek and Paul were the right choice for that one. And FYI, my favorite song from Snow White is one song, the one the prince sings after she sings I'm Wishing, and it's definitely going to get cut, and it's definitely going to get replaced with a song that's not even half as good, because people think it's boring. I'm sad.
Yeah, it's an interesting project, because when you look at the composite parts of it, Rachel Zegler and Mark Platt are both great. Like, Rachel Zegler, well, I say Rachel Zegler's great. We all assume Rachel Zegler's great based on the roles that she is getting. We are yet to actually see her in anything, but I really like the casting, and like I said, she would not be getting these roles if she was not incredibly talented. Mark Platt, as I mentioned, I love Gifted. Gifted is a really good film, I think, and 500
Not Mark
Days...
Platt. You said Mark Platt?
Mark Webb is what I meant to say. I combined two names there. Well, no, I didn't combine two names. I meant to say...
His name is Mark Platt.
Yes.
You just said the wrong name.
I'm just dumb, okay? Let's
just continue going. Yeah.
So, Mark Webb, obviously, director, really great. I love Gifted. I love 500 Days of Summer. I quite enjoy Amazing Spider-Man. He's a really good director. But then, like you mentioned, Mark Platt as a producer, always issues there. And then Benji Pasek.
I mean, not always. Like, he's done basically every modern movie musical.
Yeah,
it's just that
doesn't
I feel like
hope.
Yeah, I feel like he just defaulted to Pasek and Paul because of the history with like he has with them.
And even then,
that's
as you
where my
mentioned, like they themselves are like really, they do some really interesting stuff with their songwriting and their music, and then some they really don't. So it's like a really weird film in terms of some of it sounds really interesting, but also there hasn't really been a particularly good Disney live action film yet. So will this be the one to break the duck? Who knows? It's a...
Okay, Cinderella was good.
Yeah, but that... I'm not sure.
Cruella was good. Wink, wink, on to our next piece of news.
When I was talking about the live action, I meant like... I wasn't counting Cinderella because the kind of movement to have all these really big ones where they just take the exact story and do it in live action was sort of just after Cinderella, and that it was after Cinderella they stopped doing a lot of the more interesting changes to it. I'm waffling. Let's move on to the next piece of news.
Cruella sequel. That's all I can really say.
Yeah.
I think, the director's coming back, and I'm presuming most of the creative team's coming back. Listen, if I hadn't seen the movie and I heard this news, I would be like, oh, why? This is dumb. But I have seen the movie, and I actually think that this is very fun. I think that Cruella is camp, and I think just like the creative team that they have behind it is just like so exciting that they could literally do anything, and it's going to be fun and kooky and crazy, and it's going to be a good time.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So on the last piece of our sort of Disney small bit, I mentioned my feelings on the live action Disney movies, and the least interesting of those is getting a Disney Plus prequel. Do you have any thoughts on the Beauty and the Beast
prequel?
Disney Plus prequel?
Yeah, it's about, I almost said Luke Evans, but Gaston and LeFou, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think what's gonna be funny here is that Disney like kind of hyped up that LeFou was gonna be like their first LGBT character, and then he barely got like any scenes. So now that he has his own long form show, they're gonna have to like put their money where their mouth is and like show him being gay.
They're not.
I mean, listen. They might. I genuinely feel like this would be the project to do it. It depends who they have making it, because I feel like it's a possibility. If they have like an LGBT creator behind the show, I think that there might be a real possibility.
I think they're cowards, so I don't think they're going to do it. Is my takeaway from it, but we'll see.
I mean, they are cowards, but like, I don't know, because like Luke Evans is gay. Josh Gad is not gay to my knowledge, but I think he's down for anything. So
you only get the factual news here on the newscast, where we tell you Josh Gad's down for anything.
Well, he's welcome to correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, there are deleted scenes from Beauty and the Beast that more openly hint LeFou's feelings as a character towards Gaston. So, obviously, I think the character would not have signed on knowing these things. It was more of an editing decision, as far as I'm aware, than an actual like writing and filming decision. Yeah, I don't know. If they do that, sure, I'll be interested in the series. If anything, they were some of the better and more like energetic and interesting parts of the Beauty and the Beast film. If a missed opportunity with
they were the better parts. Like Luke Evans as Gaston is like god tier casting.
Oh, it's great casting.
It's so good. I want to see them kiss.
We won't. I do as well. It's not going to happen.
I mean, I feel like that's one of the few contexts where I could be like, yeah, this show makes sense.
Or if they make
Continuing.
If they make it a Love Simon spin-off. After relegating Love Victor to Hulu Plus.
This is the first great LGBT romance in Disney history. Will be this show.
Moving on. Would you like to introduce the next piece of news?
Willy Wonka?
Yes.
Okay, speaking of musicals, if you hadn't heard, there's going to be another prequel of a similar nature, aka no one really asked for this. Timothée Chalamet is playing Willy Wonka in the Charlie and Chocolate Factory prequel. It's going to be about a man who sees color within the greys of dreary England, and I'm assuming opens a candy factory because of it. And it's also going to be a musical origin story. So,
yeah.
Yes. DF exclusive that Nathan Crowley has been cast in it. So.
Nathan Crowley is a production designer.
Yes. As for Willy Wonka, if you don't know this, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory does have a sequel, and it's called Charlie and the Glass Elevator or something of that sort. Absolutely no clue why they're not doing a canon sequel like that's actually been written by Roald Dahl. I don't know why they're just making stuff up if they're going to continue on the story, but it's kind of interesting, I think.
I don't.
Like,
I just don't get who was asking for this film. I don't get what demographic they think this is going to appeal to, because with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that's very much like sort of our age and above in terms of where that featured as a major part of the childhood of if that, but like I don't think that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is exactly like a story that is particularly popular in sort of young people of today. Yet in adding Timothée Chalamet, they seem to be going for a very young demographic. So I don't see where the appeal for this film is going to be. I don't get why everything needs to have a prequel. Like, as you mentioned, Cruella wasn't bad, but I just don't see why every character needs to sort of have a prequel story. I don't find it that interesting.
Yeah.
I don't care why he opened a chocolate factory. That's not the interesting crux of the character. And I really like Timothée Chalamet, but I just don't like that as casting. I don't think that fits.
It's weird because Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is about like teaching a lesson to children.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably going to be like some sort of like coming of age movie.
I don't know. I don't have too much to say about this. I just think that it looks like a film that is going to be without a demographic that no one asked for in an oversaturated market of prequels that no one asked for. So,
but you know what it is going to be? A musical, baby.
That is true. That is true.
I think we need more of those.
It
doesn't matter. I'll pay the price.
Yeah. Okay. I'll allow that.
Speaking of more musicals, very sad to announce Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, which was a TV show, has been canceled after 2 seasons. There's not much to say about this other than I'm very sad. I very much enjoyed it, and now it's taken from us. Michael hasn't seen it, but he's mourning with me. I know.
Why are you calling me out
He's
like
mourning
this?
with me. Number 2, Next Victim.
Next Victim.
Lovecraft Country has been canceled after its first season.
Very sad.
The creator, Misha Green,
It's Lovecraft
shared...
Country, by the way.
Oops.
It's fine.
I wrote down Lovecraft Country. It's okay. It's fine. I'm sorry to the audience. The U.S. was split in...
Okay, sure. Go on.
Yeah, we are. Thank you so much. The U.S. has been split into 4 different parts, and there's going to be zombies, and the zombies have their own state in the middle of the United States.
So that's what the you actually introduced. That's what the season 2 that Misha Green had proposed and planned and had written several episodes of was going to actually be about. It's a weird one because the cast had apparently set aside time in their schedules, so that's Jonathan Majors, Journey Smollett, and obviously Misha Green herself had set aside time to produce a second season, and whilst it may have not achieved the viewership that they expected, it did have quite sort of a beloved sort of undercurrent. It had quite a niche following. Jonathan Majors is going to become a great household name. The same with Journey Smollett. The same with Misha Green with her upcoming Tomb Raider sequel. I think they're all going to become very big. So I feel like it just feels like a waste of the talents at their disposal after what's a really good first season. I really enjoyed it. So I found that super weird, and I hope that there's some sort of fan outcry which reverses that decision, because I'd be very interested. The idea of a wasteland territory occupied by zombies in the US, very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, we're recording this on the 4th of July, speaking of the United States. Congratulations if you're celebrating.
They were not even
and by
releasing
celebrating,
this today.
I mean...
What is wrong with you?
I wanted to say, I just wanted to... I'm not a big fan of the 4th of July, but it makes me happy when other people are happy, so...
Hey guys, you know when you're listening to this? Well, here's another arbitrary date, which has nothing to do with the date you're listening to this.
Shut up, I'm celebrating a holiday. It's not a particularly good holiday in its historical context.
It's not even a holiday.
And we probably
for
shouldn't
me.
be very proud of this country. And you don't celebrate it because you're British.
Exactly.
You know what? The one time I went to London, I went to Portobello Road, and I went to a cupcake shop there, and they had a 4th of July cupcake. So, obviously some people are celebrating it. It was red velvet, which is an American delicacy. On to our next piece of news.
Good Omens. Good Omens has been renewed for season 2, which is an interesting piece of news because people initially thought, why are you doing this? The whole point is that the book is one and done. However, Neil Gaiman is on board to help write the second season. So that's very exciting because it was really well received the first season.
Yeah. I watch Good Omens. To me, it's just like if this show came out maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, it would have banged on Tumblr.
True.
That's how I feel about it. And also, they don't celebrate the 4th of July there because it's a British show. So they are not privy to it.
Look, honestly, I think Prime are one of the most interesting of the streaming services because I feel like they pump out way less shows than the others, but when they do, they tend to be just such a higher quality, and they're able to put so much more behind them because they have so few shows. And Good Omens one of that. They really promoted it, and it did really well, clearly, with the fact that a second season was never even on the cards, and the fan outcry has clearly reached a point where this is now happening. And anything that keeps David Tennant booked and busy, I'll take it.
We will be watching.
We will be watching. And, you know, what better casting is there than Frances McDormand playing God? Like, what more do you want?
For her to win another Oscar?
This is true. So, we've mentioned 3 TV shows. We've mentioned 2 that are being cancelled, 1 that's being renewed. Now, moving on to arguably the best show on TV at the moment. There was Succession news finally. Which piece of Succession news would you like to start with?
Season 3 will be premiering in the fall, baby.
Which I'm lucky, and I came late onto it, so I watched it like a few months ago. I cannot imagine how long people who watched it on release cannot imagine how bad it's been waiting this long for it. But it's very exciting that it is coming so soon.
That's because the end of season 2 is just like incredible. Like, yeah. I would say if you haven't watched it, the last 5 minutes of season 2 is just like the biggest like cliffhanger, cathartic moment, like masterfully written, directed, acted. It's insane, and we've just been waiting.
But this fall, there's been no specific release date announced yet. But with the announced cast, some of the announced directors, season 3 looks like it is going to only improve on the brilliant show. And one thing that is actually really, the next piece of news is really heartening as to the quality of it, is writer Georgia Pritchett coming out and saying that Succession will continue for max 5 seasons, possibly more like 4, which I think is something that traditionally was very British in terms of like you have a very short set amount of seasons, and I think it's really permeating across into the US. And I think knowing when to stop and not dragging out beyond its end point is such a great way to run a show. So it's really exciting and heartening to see that they are sort of capping themselves when it could so easily go on for like 8-9 seasons.
I mean, yeah, so Succession will basically end when, I'm presuming, they find a new successor of the company. Like, that's the entire premise of the show. And there are only so many moves you can make before things get stale.
He's old.
You know?
The character
is
like
old. It's like playing the same chess game for ever. Like, it's going to have to event. Like, the quicker you get it, the more entertaining it is to watch. You know?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I think if it went
I just hope that it wraps up
seasons,
nicely.
They're not comparable in terms of quality, but like I feel like it would just end up like Empire, where like the first season of Empire was fairly exciting and had a fun premise, and then by, like you kind of mentioned, by like sort of the later seasons, it was just, oh, so we're doing this move again. It's the same people portraying the same people. I feel like Succession would go down the same route if they took it on for too many seasons.
Yeah, also a thing with Succession is that the character writing is like there. So all the characters have a pretty like set in stone arc. Like you're expecting to see like, so once characters reach their arc, Succession is not the kind of show that's gonna like take that away from them and have them like make the same mistake unless it's for like a specific reason. Like the writing is so deliberate that if a character is going to learn something, it's just going to ruin the show if they go back on that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Go stream Succession. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I Succession pilled Michael. The reason he watched it was because of me.
This is true. I will not argue with that. But it's really good. And I maintain that Succession or Barry are probably the best show. One of those two are probably the best show on TV right now. So definitely go and check that out.
So our next piece of news is another TV show, but it's not exactly a TV show in the traditional sense where it's a bunch of like, it's one serial story. If you didn't know, Star Wars, Lucasfilm is partnering with a bunch of studios in Japan, and they're making kind of, I guess it's an anthology called Star Wars Visions.
It's an anthology of anime short films. Yes,
so very excited. So there's a long list of studios that you can look at Discussing Film website. There are a couple of behind the scenes, not website, but on the Twitter page. There's a couple of behind the scenes things you can see that we've posted of just them talking to the creators and the different kinds of studios that they're doing. Not the studios they've partnered with and the different kind of stories that they're doing. I know that people are most excited for Trigger Studio. I don't know what they've done because I'm not an anime fan, but people are so excited. They must be like a great studio. I
think it's also a thing of one of the real issues with Star Wars, especially with elements of the sequel trilogy, where people felt that Force Awakens was just sort of a copy, and then Rise of Skywalker took a villain from the original trilogy, which really sort of burdened the plot, and it felt like Star Wars was kind of just doing the same stuff. So with the announcement of Star Wars Visions and certain other Star Wars projects, it's really interesting to see them branch off in different directions and take on what will hopefully be a really unique project and something that's really interesting, I think. And it'll be, not much is known right now apart from the few clips, as you mentioned, that were released, but it will be interesting to see as more comes out.
Yeah. The way that they all talk about it, they have like a lot of respect for Star Wars, and they're all really excited about the project, so I think it's going to be very good. Yeah,
absolutely. So moving on to the next piece of news, Damien Chazelle's Babylon, which is going to be a film taking place in the 1920s about Hollywood. A cast has been announced, so Olivia Wilde, Spike Jonze, Phoebe Tonkin, and the big screen return of Tobey Maguire, who has taken very few projects in recent years where he said he's sort of semi-retired and only projects that interest him enough will sort of bring him back in an acting role. He sort of does a lot of production. So I think this is a really, really interesting cast. I love Olivia Wilde. I love Spike Jonze. I don't really know that much about Phoebe Tonkin, but I trust Damien Chazelle casting sort of inherently. And it's really interesting to see what about the role will have brought Tobey Maguire back. So what do you make of the cast?
I think, looking at the casting and looking at the premise and looking at Damien Chazelle's previous work, La La Land, I think this is going to be a very indulgent film. I feel like the premise about like old Hollywood talkies is kind of very a classic idea, like we saw Singing in the Rain and The Artist. It's a very, if you like cinema, you like old movies, that's a really great space to operate in, and it's obvious that Damien Chazelle has a respect for that. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is going to be like very much, if you thought like La La Land was an ode to old Hollywood, this movie is going to be very indulgent in that sense.
Bean,
what?
I found out who Phoebe Tonkin is.
Oh no, who is she?
She played Cleo in H2O.
Cleo.
I'm so...
Queen.
I genuinely had not made the connection of who that was, but that's great casting. I love that. That's brilliant.
I'm so excited for this movie.
Yeah.
Isn't Emma Stone also in it?
That sounds correct, but I am not willing to commit to that off the top of my head because I value the journalistic integrity of the Discussing Film Newscast too much for that, so I will just admit that I didn't do the research.
Okay, because if she's in that movie, it's gonna be a serve. Like, it's gonna be a certified banger.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, look, Damien Chazelle could literally cast anyone, and I'd just be like, he can turn it around. He can do it. He doesn't need them. There is, when Damien Chazelle makes a movie that is not incredible, I will doubt him. You're like he can do anything, and I will just be like, yep, back it.
So apparently Emma Stone was cast, but then Margot Robbie was in talks to replace her. I don't know what happened with that.
Maybe the Cruella sequel.
Or maybe she left. No.
Anyways, so that
Deadline said she left.
So yeah, so maybe we don't know about Emma Stone. It seems that she's not part of the cast, but Olivia Wilde, Spike Jonze, Phoebe Tonkin, and Tobey Maguire is an outstanding cast.
Yeah, maybe Olivia Wilde replaced her. That
Possibly.
seems
That fits
about right.
Yeah, that fits. So finally, in a move that is odd, but at the same time feels like, yeah, that makes sense. The Weeknd is set to star in The Idol for HBO. He's also going to co-write and executive produce alongside Sam Levinson, who did Euphoria. So the series follows a female pop singer starting a romance with an enigmatic LA club owner who is the leader of a secret cult. What do you make of this?
I think The Weeknd is a cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
He puts a lot of homages to cinema in his music videos. Sam Levinson, he made Euphoria. That's all I could say about him. Mm-hmm. He also made Malcolm and Marie. That's also as much as I can say about him. That's as far as my opinion goes.
Yeah, I think Euphoria is brilliant. I think that Malcolm and Marie is less so. I mean, not The Weeknd's first acting role, obviously was also in Uncut Gems, which, look, I'm going to take my opportunity on this platform to say that the review on the Discussing Film website does not reflect me. Giving Uncut Gems half a star is a disgrace. So, putting that on record. But The Weeknd, as you kind of mentioned, there are a lot of homages, and he's shown a lot of interest in film and cinema through his work. A lot of his sort of music videos are beautiful, and some of his live performances shows a real understanding of sort of cinematic principles. So it is interesting to see. I'm not sure. I don't love the idea of someone writing themselves as an enigmatic club owner. It feels
one reservation I have is that these are two guys who are co-writing something about a woman, and she's probably going to get manipulated in some respect. And I've never seen Euphoria, but something about this a little sussy.
Euphoria is, I am saying this as a man, so that obviously needs to be taken with a caveat. I would say the writing of women in Euphoria is fairly good at times, but as you mentioned, I think it's kind of different when you're writing about, as you mentioned, sort of like, she's a woman who's going to be dealing with this leader of a cult, and there are sort of quite troubling parallels in that to sort of treatment of women by these sort of people in Hollywood and in society. So it feels like a bit, I love The Weeknd, it feels like a bit of an ego project. Obviously we'll find out more the more we hear about it. Doesn't fill me with tons of hope.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how this develops.
Yeah. So moving on to the final piece of news.
This is not sponsored, not an ad. Hopefully, if you like films, you know what the Criterion collection is. It's basically like remastered special editions of quite important works of cinema. Barnes & Nobles is an American bookstore, and they carry the Criterion collection, and a couple times a year or once a year, they have quite a big sale on their Criterion collection. So right now, for the entire month of July until August, if you go to Barnes & Noble's online or in store, you can get Criterion movies at half off. And they can be pretty expensive, between like $30, $50, maybe $60 if you're getting like a set. But yes, this is a good time to buy Criterions if you live in the US.
Or to be in pain if you're me.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they have international shipping. We should go and make a list of our favorite Criterions and put it on the Twitter account.
Maybe. That could be fun.
That will be fun.
Maybe.
I'm not a huge cinephile, but there are some movies on that list that I do very much enjoy.
When they make a Paddington Criterion, I will do that.
Oh my god. Do you know what's one Criterion I really want? The Shop Around the Corner. I want a remastered Criterion version of that movie so bad.
The one that I will regularly see whilst out is, I think, the Marriage Story Criterion. Is just literally just physically is so cool. I love the packaging for it. So yeah. Well, actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm committing now. We are going to do that. Because there are some stuff such as that. We'll do like either a little thread or a few tweets about the Criterion collection and some of our highlights from that. We'll hopefully start utilizing, if you pay attention to it, we'll start utilizing the Twitter more and more as we kind of get our footing with this show.
Because another thing with the Criterion collection is that physical media is dying. So especially for a lot of streaming movies, they're only getting Criterion releases. Mm-hmm. Like The Sound of Metal or One Eye Me, like they're only getting Criterion releases. So it's very important to support Criterion.
Yeah, obviously they are quite expensive, and we can't assume anyone's sort of financial situation, but if you do have the disposable income to be able to support physical media, I get a lot of like people who ask me about my DVD collection, and I'm just sort of like, well, as someone who's such a huge fan of film, who spends so much time like engaging in it, it feels almost wrong to sort of, if I have the means, not have this sort of collection. And Criterion's sort of a very pure expression of that. So, yeah, we if you check out the Twitter, maybe by the time of the release of this, it'll depend on when this is released. But yeah, we should hopefully have that up.
Yes. So they're half off. So if you didn't have the disposable income before, maybe if you've wanted to buy something for a while, but it was kind of pricey, you can do it now.
Right.
Barnes & Nobles.
Right, thank you so much for listening to episode 6 of the Discussing Film Newscast. I am Michael Slavin, and I'm at MichaelSlavin98 on Twitter. I'm joined as always by Beatrin Shahzad, who is at Bayabeen on Twitter. We are at DF Newscast, and if you want to check out the premier place for film news on Twitter, then it's obviously at Discussing Film, as I'm sure you all know. Make sure to check out on Spotify, Apple Music, and leave us a review, save us, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. All of the positive things that people plug at the end of stuff. Just do that if you could. That would be appreciated.
Like us on Apple Podcasts.
Exactly. Subscribe to us on Twitter. Follow us on Spotify. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week.